Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. I'm Nancy Hart. I'm the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Tennessee, and I'd like to introduce you to some of the other people who are here with me today. No stranger to the folks of Sullivan County is Barry Starbursts, District Attorney General of the 2nd Judicial District. To his left is Joel Reese, who is the Tennessee Coordinator for Appalachia Haida. I'll explain a little bit more about what Haida is in just a moment. And, oh my God, I'm pulling a blank. I'm having a senior moment.
John Co.
Thank you, John, from DEA. Boy, am I sorry about that. Nobody could ever forget Wayne Anderson, though. His name will be one of the last on my lips, I'm sure. Blaine Wade, Chief of Police in Bristol, Tennessee. And, of course, I always had this tendency to say Big David Quillen because that's how I knew him from back in the day when there were two David Quillens at the police department in Kingsport. They're here with us today because we are so pleased to announce that Sullivan County has now been designated as a Haida County. Haida stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And nationwide, there are 28 of these groups. They were formed to respond to those areas of the country where there was an intensive need for reaction to drug problems. The Appalachia Haida, where we are, is a little bit unusual in that it's a rural Haida. Many of the Haidas are actually in larger cities. But our Haida is a rural one, and it encompasses several states in the Appalachian region. Tennessee, both the eastern and middle districts of Tennessee are involved. The western district of Virginia is involved. Both districts of Kentucky and the southern and northern districts of Ohio. As you can see, that those are the counties of those states that follow the Appalachian Mountains. And of course, as anyone who is paying attention to the drug problems in our country right now know, the Appalachian region is one of the most hard hit. We are facing some of the greatest challenges, particularly from opioids. So these federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies have banded together in these high-intensity drug trafficking areas to stop the proliferation of drug dealers and the poison they sell to our citizens every day. Appalachia Haida, I should tell you, is well regarded. It was the 2015 Haida of the Year, and out of the other 28 that encompass very large metropolitan areas, that was quite an honor. As a part of that also, you should know that the Appalachia Haida was one of the first to provide naloxone, which is the antidote to a heroin overdose or an overdose from an opioid. They were some of the first areas to provide neonatal abstinence syndrome awareness, a huge problem and one that we'll talk about with Sullivan County. Within the Appalachia Haida, we have 7 drug task forces that are sponsored by DEA and others. We have an Upper East Tennessee task force, which is sponsored by DEA, and that's the one that will primarily be the one that Sullivan County joins. And then we also have down in Knoxville the Rocky Top Task Force, which was the drug Outstanding Opioid Investigative Effort Award winner in 2015. So a lot of good work has been going on in the Appalachian area. So why did we want Sullivan County to be a Haida county? It was important to us because especially we at the U.S. Attorney's Office, primarily in Greenville, have historically worked very closely with Barry and his folks in shutting down the purveyors of drugs and harmful substances. You might remember a few years ago when we were first hearing about synthetic drugs. Those were up here in Sullivan County, and we took an aggressive stance and beat back that threat to a great extent. We've had some notable cases that Barry can brief you on, but again, through that close cooperative effort, we've been able to take cases that were appropriate for federal prosecution. We've worked with them on wire intercepts, on search warrants, on any number of things, and we've had a great success in doing so. And one of the things I think that tipped the scale for me in finding it so important to get them on board again was their statistics. Sullivan County is ravaged by opioid abuse, and also I think you all have been #1 in Tennessee for neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is simply the drug-addicted babies that are born in our county every day. It's a location factor, too. The Haidas all work together to make sure that not only regionally, but nationwide, we're all working on the same page. So up here in Sullivan, you have I-26 and I-81 intersecting. That's a primary east-west and a primary north-south route. Close by, you have access to I-40, I-75, I-85, I-95, within just a few hours' travel. Those are drug routes. Those are places where you are going to find the traffickers who are connecting up to sell their wares. We are constantly under attack from gangs and groups out of Detroit, Charlotte, and Atlanta trying to get a foothold here. We have fought them back, and I think we've had great success in keeping them from really establishing themselves here, especially in Sullivan. And of course now we have the new threat of international connections. Heaven knows what substances coming in from China. Things that we can identify as steroids, things that are unidentifiable as synthetics. The internet has changed everything for arranging for drugs to be brought in. So the effect of this designation will be a new tool, both for us in the federal system, but especially for law enforcement here in our county and our 2 major cities here. This will provide overtime money for our law enforcement officers who are working stings, working undercovers, working to do observation. And especially this is going to tie in with our opioid fraud and abuse detection unit. We had a press conference in Knoxville a couple of weeks ago, and I have to tell you, we don't do press conferences very often in our office. We are not prone to do that. We send out press releases, but to actually bring a conference together, it has to be big news. And so we did that a couple of weeks ago to announce that we were one of 12 districts in the entire nation to be funded with a special prosecutor who is tasked with identifying and prosecuting healthcare professionals, pharmacies, and other providers who are perpetuating opioid fraud and abuse throughout our area. So we know that this Haida connection and the monies that will be available now to work on opioid abuse will help us in that effort as well. Our prosecutor has already, that's a data analytics program, the Opioid Fraud and Abuse Detection Unit, and we have already identified targets in Sullivan County, and we're coming after them. Any doctor, any nurse practitioner, any pharmacist, anybody who owns a supposed pain clinic, who is handing out pills that either get people addicted or cause them to become addicted or continue that addiction, we're going to be looking at you. We're not going after our reputable providers, but those who are outliers, those who have, whether to feed their own greed or their own addiction, who have turned themselves effectively into drug dealers, we're going to be looking at you. And this cooperative effort now will help that as well. Haida will also provide what we in law enforcement call deconfliction. It could be that the same people are being looked at by Sullivan County, who are also operating full out in Kingsport, have a branch in Bristol, may have a branch of their operation in in southern Ohio. So when that happens, Haida has the ability to track those people and to let us know if we might all be looking at the same targets so we can reconcentrate our efforts for the best effect. And so what I'm here to tell you today is that this means that overtime for 3 full-time task officers is now on the table, and we're ready to use that to help Sullivan County. As I reiterate to everyone who will listen to me, this is not the war on drugs. This is a war on drug dealers, whether they are medical professionals or gang members from Detroit, whoever they are. If they are purveying this poison in our district, we're going to look at them. Our goal is simply no more babies in the back seats of cars while parents are overdosed in the front seat. Our goal is no more drug-addicted babies born into constant pain and withdrawal. No more drug-addled drivers on the roads of Tennessee. And no more teenagers trying to kick an opioid addiction that may have started with a few pills ill-advisedly taken. So we are glad to partner in this new way with Sullivan County and its struggle against drug dealers for the very lives of our citizens. And so at this time, I would like to turn this over to Barry Starbursts, District Attorney General of Sullivan County.
Thank you. Nancy, I appreciate your fine words and also your description of the purpose and the goals of Haida. And I can tell you that I, along with my office, really appreciate the fact that we are now designated as a Haida location. This is something that's been sought by the District Attorney's Office in Sullivan County since my predecessor, General Wells, and something I've coveted since 2011. And it couldn't have come at a better time. As you all are aware, this county and this region are full of opioid epidemic, that we have a severe meth problem, and it's already been described, a NAS baby problem, drug-addicted babies. We're seeing higher levels of deaths, overdose deaths. We're seeing more people in the hospital that don't die that are overdosed, and we're seeing increased drug activity locally and by gangs. So having the resources of Haida and the benefits that it brings and the designation are sorely needed at this time. So we're very appreciative that we're able to be in this position, that we think it's, as Nancy said, another tool that we need to fight the severe drug problems that we have in Sullivan County. And I also value very much the relationship we've had with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Without them and their help and their assistance, we wouldn't have this designation. And I also want to tell Joey,
your turn.
My turn.
Joey Reese.
Reese, how much I appreciate his efforts, because he has been working long and hard to get this. But I'm looking forward to the relationship I will have with him, along with the continued relationship we have with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And as Nancy said, we're already hitting the ground running. We've already targeting people that we think are very responsible for a lot of the problems we have here. So we're going to use these resources to good use, and we're going to continue the relationships that we have with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we're going to expand relationships we have with other agencies and obtain more resources, more information from them, which will allow us to be more successful in our efforts. And again, I thank you all for making this moment possible. It's something we've looked forward to for a long time, and the reason we wanted it was because this is not just some title or some press conference. There's real benefits to having this designation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. Joel, we call him Joey Reese. Joel Reese, our Haida coordinator. Would you like to take the podium?
Thanks. Just as a bit of explanation, Haida falls under ONDCP, which is the Drug Czar's office. It's basically a federal grant program whereby state and local and federal law enforcement officials are mandated to work together. It's governed by an executive board, which is composed of 50% feds and 50% state and local guys. And it really brings, like New York City's a Haida area. Look, they've got money to conduct business with or without Haida. In rural counties, we do not. I was the resident in charge a long time ago of the DEA office in Knoxville and up here. We did things that we could not have done without Haida. Not only does it provide funding for overtime for the task force officers, provides buy money, equipment, training that we just don't have up here. And, you know, it's a cliche, but up here we have to work together, and it really is a force multiplier. And like I say, that's a cliche, and I hate to use it, but it's true. It's true in this case. And we are arguably at the very epicenter of the opioid epidemic. We're, like I like to say, I'm a mountain boy. I grew up in the mountains of western North Carolina. We're best at the worst stuff. Always have been. You can take it back to white liquor, then the weed, then the meth, then the pills, and now unfortunately it's heroin and fentanyl. And it's coming. It's here. And it's not going away anytime soon. So, and one more thing, and I'll close. There are several criteria for being included as a Haida county. One is your area has to impact other parts of the country, which this one obviously does, partly due to its location, partly due to we just got some good crooks here that actually it's multi-jurisdictional organizations. But the other thing, you have to prove that the people that are already there in place have an effort, a concentrated effort to combat the problem already, and that goes to partnerships. In East Tennessee, we're blessed with partnerships that you don't see in most places. These two folks here have done. The U.S. Attorney's Office here we consistently ranks in the top 5 in the country for multi-jurisdictional OCDF cases. Mr. Starbursts, he was the driving force behind a lot of this. And these guys over here, you don't get anywhere when you fight with the good guys. And once you figure out that fighting the bad guys is better than fighting with the good guys, magic happens. And we need this here, and I'm glad we finally got it. It's been a long time coming. So thanks.
I should mention that as part of the executive board of Haida, who made this designation possible, TBI was an important part of that. KPD is represented by Chief David Roush on that Haida executive board. He was an important part of that. Zach Lee of the Western District of Virginia gave us terrific support to get Sullivan County named. And an important part of that also was ASAC Chris Tersigny of DEA, and DEA is represented here today by SAC Open.
Good afternoon. As the task force commander of the DEA in Johnson City, I am extremely excited to have Sullivan County designated as a Haida county. Part of our task force, we've got a few agents, we've got a lot more task force officers, and without our cooperation with state and locals, we quite frankly wouldn't be able to do our job. So I look forward to having someone from Sullivan County designated to be part of the task force. Again, thank Haida, thank the U.S. Attorney's Office for their continued support in our cases in Upper East Tennessee, and Mr. Starbursts as well. We have a great working relationship with his office. Thank you.
Thank you. As you all can tell by now, I started here in Sullivan County as prosecutor on the state level many years ago, and it was my great fortune to have worked with all 3 of these fellows at that time. They're the best. Sullivan County is blessed with terrific law enforcement, and of course Barry as well. Barry and I tried a couple of cases.
That's true, and I just want to echo, we couldn't be Haida if I didn't have Sheriff Anderson, Chief Quillen, and Chief Wade doing what they're doing. They have been so cooperative, not only just being here today, but when we went through the application process, every one of them wrote letters, assisted me in so many different ways. And it's not just with Haida. We have a very good drug task force, and we have very good vice officers. And I couldn't do what I do in the courtroom if it weren't for their commitment to provide quality investigations and quality investigators. So I don't want to leave them out of the equation. I'm fortunate to have the U.S. Attorney's Office, the DEA, and Haida, but it all really starts on the ground floor with our law enforcement. If they're not doing their job, we don't have any cases to present. And I'm very blessed that all three of them are very active in our drug task force and provide me quality in law enforcement efforts, prosecutions, and investigators. So I didn't want to leave them out of my remarks. Without them, we wouldn't be here today. And I very much value that I can pick up the phone and call them at any time and talk to them, and they always will listen, and they're always trying to find a way to help. And we're all on the same page together when it comes to fighting drugs.
And so, Sheriff Anderson, would you like to say something?
No, I'm really good. Thank you.
Okay. Chief? Chief? Well, thank you all for the work you do. Do you all have any questions for any of us? We'll take just a few, and then, as I said, there's a map of the entire Appalachia-Haida district that you're welcome to take a shot of. Otherwise, thank you all for coming. And
I did have a couple questions.
Yes.
I understand several surrounding counties were already part of Haida. Why is it taking so long, I guess, for Sullivan County to be added?
It's not an easy process. Those have happened over time.
Yeah, originally when this Haida was established, it was basically a marijuana cultivation Haida. And so some of the more urban areas of Appalachia were not included because they might have been growing weed, but they weren't growing as much as they were in the rural county. So and we in 2002, they started morphing a little bit into a polydrug Haida. And actually, I think probably we're looked more favorably on about new counties now with us being at the center of the opioid epidemic. I think they're trying to put resources where they're needed. And
okay, and also, is there anything specific local police departments such as Sullivan County, Bristol, and Kingsport will be receiving because of Haida?
The
Is there a specific amount of funding or?
There will be, each year there will be a budget that will allocate monies to each of them. They'll submit their requests and that will be allocated out of the national budget. But even more valuable will be the deconfliction, the intel, the connections. So I think those are, there is some money, but there's also some other benefits in the access.
Will y'all be available for one-on-one interviews afterwards, a quick one-on-one?
Nancy says okay.
Of course.
whatever Nancy,
I'm in your courtroom.
whatever Nancy says.
I'm in your courtroom
That's
today.
fine.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you again.
All right, thank you all.